As I move from trying to repair to equip relationships.
Compromise really is a set of trades. I'll do this if you do that.
Seeds for your marriage.
All right, it is official. It is official. Welcome to Seeds for Your Marriage podcast. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Trisha.
And we are joined today by Phyllis and Sherrod Miller. And we are just so thrilled to have you with us. Our journey started with you in
2010.
2010. So we've been with you for 14 years and counting. So welcome to the Seeds for Your Marriage podcast. And let's get started. Why don't we introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your background?
I'd like to actually introduce Sherrod Miller. He is one of the creators of the Couple Communication Program. And maybe I'll say a little bit about my background and then how we got hooked up doing this together.
This is Phyllis Miller, by the way. She didn't give her name.
Oh, okay. All right. I had been doing some training in corporations and business communications, basically doing some business writing training and efficient reading training in business. And that was in the day before all of the communication options that we have of today, but those were in person training programs. So that, and part of the thing was that we had children at home, and once they left or went off to college, then Sherrod and I could work together. And so that's when I joined him in the work that he was doing.
Right. And my background on this was after I finished actually a degree in social work, I was working in an outpatient psychiatry clinic at the University of Minnesota, and then went back to school for a postdoctoral program. I didn't have a doctorate, but they took a couple of social workers in marriage counseling. It was, there couldn't have been 2 or 3 programs around the whole country, and there happened to be at the University of Minnesota when we were living there. Phyllis was from Minnesota originally. I grew up in Colorado, and anyway, we were living in that area. And so I went back to the university there. And during that time, something significant happened. I had an internship at the court services in Minneapolis, the county court service. And part of my job was to evaluate kids, whether they should get married or not.
They were teenagers, let's put it that way.
Yeah. The law was if a girl was 16, she needed parent or court permission to marry. And so that's where some would come to the court to see if the court would sign off for them. The irony of the thing was all they had to do is drive to South Dakota and get married, because there the law was age 15 for...
Or 14, I think it was.
Well, anyway, it was younger.
Wow.
And so it was, kind of fruitless, I thought. And so what occurred to me is rather than trying to evaluate these kids, because they really, I would say 95% of the couples, the girl was already pregnant. So I thought, well, let's shift and start offering a class to equip them rather than try and prevent them or whatever. Anyway, and that was huge in my mind. And what shifted is I moved from trying to repair to equip relationships. And so from that time on, then at the university, there were colleagues there. We were in graduate school together, and we started to develop what's now known as couple communication. And so the thrust has really been on equipping people to do better together rather than waiting till they're on the ropes and go for repair.
I love that. I love the comment, instead of repair, I want to equip them. I love that.
Yeah, it's proactive instead of reactive by nature.
Yeah.
And
It's educational, even though for some couples it can be therapeutic or, fit in counseling. So it kind of fits the spectrum, I think.
Well, and what we've learned over the years, I think, is that good therapy has an equipping element in it. And the couples program is used by a lot of therapists, as well as in other more educational or developmental settings. churches primarily and schools, so forth.
I can tell you, we are a case of one marriage that you have equipped us to actually help to build a healthy marriage
Our own
right
marriage
here. Our
first.
own marriage first, right? Starts with us.
Well, you
That's where
can.
it starts.
Yeah.
It does start with us. And I'm curious, Phyllis and Sherrod, just healthy is the word I use. And I'm curious your definition or how you think about a healthy marriage.
Well, let me show you something that's really kind of a simple. Okay. I think using my hands here, and by the way, you'll see a little shake, is that I have what's called an essential tremor. It's a Swedish gene, runs through our family. Cousin's a dentist, and close your
He had
eyes.
to quit.
he,
But anyway,
he had to quit, and I probably should. But anyway, think of two people, okay? Each hand's a person here. And when they come together, they join, they have fun together, they make love, and then sometimes they fight, okay, and argue. But that's togetherness in a sense. Then there's a time when they're apart. And do you see both hands here? I can't see
Yeah.
on the
Yep.
end screen. So, she goes to work and or whatever her day is, activities, and he's into his day and so forth. So they're together, and then there's apartness, and there's a kind of a flow of this, okay? And then there's a time when she leads and he follows, and there's a time when he leads and she follows. And so if you think about it, now, when my experience, when couples get in trouble, is they get stuck. They can't get together because they fight too much. They're afraid to get apart, or they spend a lot of time apart because something's not working here. And more traditionally, the man's led and the woman's followed, and that becomes a pattern. So they kind of get together once in a while, and then he leads. And what's missing is her leading and his accepting that influence. So with that shaky illustration, for me, a really healthy marriage is one that has this dance of all the steps, all the possibilities, and it counts their individuality and their togetherness.
I love that. Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, I think early in the collaborative marriage skills, you talk about two powerful people. And I think that, you talk about the fact that I'm an individual, Trisha's an individual, there's a me, but there's also that we component. And I think
Mhm.
that's exactly what you're speaking to, is how to move through life with that flow, and where we don't lose ourselves in each other. We maintain our individuality, but we also build that sense of connection and togetherness.
and one of the goals of the couple communication program is to help each person be stronger in the sense that they can speak, each of them, for themselves, with caring for the other, caring for themselves, the other person, and for their relationship. And
Mhm.
so I think all of those are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, just the way that God made us, He made us unique. And we each, when we get married, we each bring our strengths into that relationship. And my strength might not be Thomas's, and Thomas's might not be mine. So just if we're able to work together and learn in what situations I lead and what situations Thomas leads, it really helps with the marriage to move forward together. And like you said, then you end up spending less time fighting.
Yeah, but you have to be able to talk about
You
it in
have to be able
healthy
to talk
ways.
about it in a healthy way.
That's the essence of this. Gosh, I have so many questions, but there's one that I must ask. It was South Georgia in circa 2013 or so. We took the training
Oh,
with
right,
Phyllis and
right.
Sherrod. I think we were in Macon or somewhere down there.
Well,
You
we
may
did a
remember that.
workshop there. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's where we got certified in your program,
Uh-huh.
or got taught to train to be able to instruct. And Sherrod, I remember you always talking about the secret sauce.
Okay.
Well,
that, that is one piece, I think, of what would we call it? A framework, a map that we teach in couple communication. And would you explain
yeah,
about the
well,
map just a bit, and then the part that he calls that you have called the secret sauce. 'Cause
Yeah,
that's
let me save the secret sauce because for
Okay.
just a moment anyway.
just
It's
a
like
moment.
running a commercial when, we're cutting away now
Building up
for
to it.
We're
commercial.
building up
But
to it.
when
Got
we
it.
come back, I'll tell you about
Yeah.
secret
Stay
sauce.
tuned. You got to stay tuned. All right.
Here's the
Yeah.
commercial. First of all, let's just real briefly say what we developed at the University of Minnesota and researched was a program called couple communication. And basically, there are 4 units or 4 segments. And we want to briefly mention that because you'll see how the secret sauce positions in that. But the first session, we teach, well, in each of the sessions, we teach what I call maps, cognitive maps, mental maps, and then skill associated with it. So
And these maps, one map is to teach people how to talk together, another how to listen to one another, how to put these together. And I think it begins with a map of how people talk and
yeah,
listen.
we call it styles of communication, and they're really, I don't want to detail them. You can look it up on the internet at more information. But anyway, how people talk, effective ways and ineffective ways, is the first session. And then they look at themselves and, our system. How do we talk to each other, and how much percent in small talk, how much in shop talk, control talk, fight, spite, and then what we call search talk and aware talk. And there's a map of this, and people find themselves in the map where they are and where they'd like to go. That's the nice thing about a map, shows you where you are and gives you a choice and alternative.
Yeah.
So then you want to talk about the second session, Phyllis?
Okay, and the second session is that we introduce this framework called the awareness wheel that has on it 5 zones, if you will. And one of these zones contains the secret sauce. So there are 5 zones. One is called, should I go through each of these zones
You
or
just
not?
briefly mention them.
One is
Sure.
called getting
Can you see this all
sensory
right?
data.
Yeah, we see it fine.
Good. Mhm.
And that's things we see, hear from one another. The other is the thoughts zone, and that's our beliefs, our expectations about what might happen in the future, our thoughts about things. The third one is called the emotion zone, and that's our happiness, sadness, anger, any of those kinds of emotions or feelings that we would have. And then the fourth one is called the wants zone. We come back to that because that contains the secret sauce. But the fifth one is called the action zone of what I have done, what I have in the past, what I'm doing currently, and then what might be a future action that I plan to do.
Actually, what I will do is
What I
the
will
key
do.
word there. Mhm.
Okay, now let's go to the wants zone because that leads into the secret sauce.
Okay, so when we talk about wants for self, wants for other, who would be my partner Phyllis, and wants for us.
As
Okay.
a relationship.
And in our relationship. So anyway, having that in mind, the want zone it really comes down to very powerful. Let me say in the 1970s, when we first started developing this, emotions were really a big deal. It was kind of like getting in touch with your emotions. Everything would fall together. By the way, the wheel, every one of those zones are important, and they're all going on. This is the stuff that's inside of us as we interact with the outside world. So I don't want to overemphasize one zone to the other. They're all important. But what we found is the thing that's been least developed in the literature and so forth is the business around wants. And they're very powerful. So when we first developed the wheel many years ago, we had under want zone self. We did not have other and us.
Well, they didn't mean to do that because each of the zones would be what I think, what I've seen and heard, what I did or what I will do, what my emotions are. So at the beginning, it was just what do I want,
Mhm.
without consideration for what I might want for our relationship, or for what I might want for my partner, that my partner would say, yes, I would want that.
So what we were doing unknowingly and inadvertently is teaching people to be flaming narcissists in the sense that Phyllis would say what she want and I'd say what I'd want. And here, give me your hand. It's like pull.
Oh,
It's like we're both into this
he's
kind of,
stronger, so he'd usually pull me his way.
and that was true in life.
Yeah.
I could be
But
pretty forceful. Okay. So anyway, what's going on is now that I've told you all about my wheel and I've said what I want, I should get it. And literally for some years, that's what we were teaching. And what we didn't realize is there was no bridge. There was no other in the system. And so that changed and it was huge. So let me start with wants for self. Those are real important. They're legitimate. And somebody who has a poor sense of themselves has trouble speaking their wants or knowing their wants. And the really problematic thing is when somebody doesn't speak their wants and put it out on the table and, in a sense, make it known and negotiable, it becomes a hidden agenda. And so that you have this powerful force that I'm not telling you about that I really want, that's making interactions and decisions and life screwy and unknown in many ways. So to be able to put your wants on the table doesn't mean I get everything I want, but it's counting myself. And so that's an important piece. But I'm not the only person in the system. And you want to talk
well,
about
it's the
wants for
relationship.
others? Mhm.
So we added to this is, what do I want for my partner that my partner agrees that, yes, I would like that. And
Or based
sometimes
on my partner's interests.
Interests.
What do I want for you based on your interests, which, as you said,
for example, maybe my partner wants to go back to school and get some further education or training, that kind of thing. And what that means is that's more costs for the family, or that might, all kinds of things. It might mean that my partner can't work as much to earn money or whatever. And maybe me as a partner would, or the partner would say, well, I'd like you to do that too. How can we figure that out? And the third want is, what would be wants for our relationship? What what would help
For
us
both of
as
us.
a relationship? So thinking in terms of all of those aspects of it, that becomes a way to negotiate how we can get to some of that. It might take longer to go to school than, I'd maybe originally thought, or it might take some kind of adjustment some way. But getting all of those wants out is important, rather than keeping it, part of it, hidden and doing some kind of underhanded ways to see if I can get what I would like.
well, I was just going to add thinking systems, thinking relationship. Most of us think, in business, uh, my turf, my silo, my interests, and
Or the interests of the business.
yeah, it can be, but the interests, and particularly interests of somebody I'm in conflict with, as a way of connecting, it's really transformational. So the secret sauce, Thomas, you queued me up here, and I ran the commercial. The
Yeah.
well,
Well,
the
I have a
secret sauce, and,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
and we've discovered, whether it's in a relationship or with your kids or at work, is one, being aware of your own interests, but also the interests of others, and how can I help how can I discover those interests? Sometimes people are afraid to discover those interests because then I'd have to get it for them.
Or help them get
or
it.
help them get it, or something. But to hear it, and to the extent possible, I can help you get what you want. That's powerful stuff, because everybody wants something. Okay.
Yep,
And especially in a conflict or in a decision. And the big one is around vacations or going somewhere together. People, have this fantasy about their vacation, never talk about what they want to have happen during that time. Then they get there and get into arguments because what they wanted isn't happening, and haven't known what the other's interests are. So once you know wants, and the rest of the wheel, by the way, but we're talking primarily in the want zone now. Once that information is out, then you go to the next step. Okay, how can we brainstorm and create a solution that builds in your interests, my interests, and our interests, in a sense? And that's where the creativity comes. But it starts with solid understanding of each of our wheels, so to speak, and then out of that, generating a unique solution that fits our world.
That's so good. I just can think of an example of how actually we used that wants section, which is the wants for me, the wants for you, and the wants for us, in a situation with our children. This was years ago when our children were little, and I was so head bent on wanting to homeschool our children. And he was very, very adamant about our children going to Christian school. And it was like we were at odds. And so we got on the mats. A lot of times we've had to use for parenting, we've had to use the mats because it can be so emotional sometimes that using the mats helps us work out.
It brings peace.
It brings peace in parenting. Yeah.
And a confidence that we know we can work through this because now we're on the mat.
That's interesting.
So,
Yes.
Yeah. So whenever I was really able to get fully, like really be able to work the wheel and start getting to the deeper wants for not only for me, but for us, for the family, I was actually able to realize that the root of really why I wanted to homeschool my children is because I really wanted them to grow up where they knew the Lord and they knew they had a good foundation in understanding Christ, how to relate to Christ. And I was in the understanding that the only way that was going to happen is if I homeschooled them.
Mm.
And so once we were able to actually get to that, sometimes like things just unfold when you're on the mats. It's like as you kind of work it, you realize there's more and more. It's like I call it an onion that you peel.
You peel the onion, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so we were able to discover that. And then from there, we were able to talk about, okay, well, it doesn't have to be homeschool, but if
Yeah.
that's the goal in mind.
Just really quickly, the big breakthrough in that conversation was when she started articulating what she wanted around our kids having a strong foundation in Christ. I was able to say, honey, I want the same thing. Like, so it became a we. And now the conversation could shift to what is the solution to that, but we're actually on the same team and we want the same thing for our kids. And that
Now
was
that's where the secret sauce is.
That's important.
Mhm.
You had referred to the mats, Tricia, and with the mats, what those are, and for people who aren't familiar with them, is the awareness wheel framework that Sherrod had showed here is put on. I'm going to show this again, but it's put on a canvas, and it's about 3 feet by 3 feet, something like that, and it's on the.
That's upside down.
Oh, is that upside down for that?
Yeah, here we
Sorry
go.
about that. Sorry.
How does this look?
good. I can see it just perfect.
Yes, and we have a larger one that you can
Here,
put
you
on
let
the
your fingers
floor,
do the walking.
but there's one that goes on the floor as well. And then we have the listening side, and that's a separate mat and the larger one. And so when you had referred to the you got on the mats, Tricia, I just wanted people to know what we were talking about.
Yeah, these mats, the one I'm showing you is what we call a lap mat. It's a smaller mat.
Yes.
but it's the floor mats are 30 inches square.
30, is that it? Okay.
Uh-huh. And we put them, here's the wheel, say, and here's the listening. We put them across from each other. So say she's on the wheel and I'm on the listening. And then we teach a process we call mapping an issue, which steps through a sequence of steps that each speaks, and you rotate talking and listening. But the mats themselves give you a platform, a specific set of choices. And as you speak to it and count to each other and listen to each other, you tend to go deeper into your awareness, and sharing that is kind of what I think you were saying was so helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
By the way, there's one other thing I want to add about wants. When we think about wants, we typically, in the other person, we typically think about what do I want from you, not for you. So nothing wrong with a from, but a from is for me. Okay. So it's back to me. What I want for you is based on your interest, your wants. Now, I don't have to get somebody everything they want. The magic, and really is transformational, is when I help you get part of or as much as possible of what you want. Very different than not getting anything or never knowing what you want, or you're never sharing it, and some way preventing you, trying to put you down for wanting things. So a lot of things can happen around the want zone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll bow
absolutely.
out here for a while, let somebody
Yeah.
else talk.
Yeah, I think just this idea of compromise, and we've been hearing it so much in the world lately.
Yeah, we
Just
watch shows on TV. Go ahead, honey.
yeah, we watch shows on
Oh my gosh.
TV that these relationship shows now, these
The
where
blind
they
dating shows
yeah.
or the shows like that. Go ahead. Sorry.
It,
I'm interrupting her today for some reason. I don't know why.
and they talk about compromise. Well, I'm compromising for you, and I'm compromising in this situation, but I'm not getting what I want, or whatever the situation is. And I think back to this example that I gave with our children and the homeschooling versus Christian school situation. And if the idea was compromise, then one of us would have said, okay, well, you just homeschool then. And like Thomas could have said, you just homeschool then, and we'll just make it work.
Yeah, and
And
there'd
we
be
never
some resentment there.
exactly, there'd be some resentment. So you all talk about collaboration and how to have a collaborative marriage. And so I would love for you to talk about the difference between compromise and collaboration in a relationship.
Let's
Well,
start with
yeah,
compromise. Yeah, go
okay.
ahead.
Should I?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, compromise really is a set of trades. I'll do this if you do that. All right. I
give to get. Yeah.
to get.
Mhm.
Yes. And I gain something and I lose something. You gain something and you lose something. And so what that is for some people, that's the highest level they can ever get to, but it's fragile.
Well, partly what makes it fragile is when I think about it, what do I think about? What I got or what I gave up? And most people that had biological parents, which by the way is everybody, uh,
Think about what
there are all kinds of stories, about, but we're all human. Uh, we think about what we give up and
And-
lose more than what we
And
get.
and that is often a setup for failure of whatever the dispute is or the issue is or whatever the problem is that you're trying to do. On the other hand,
Well, the other thing about that, soon as you said you would do this and I said I'd do this, it's conditional. Okay. So soon as I see you not doing what you said you would do, that gives me permission not to do what I do.
or a little slip up.
Or a slip up. Yeah. So my eyes are on you and not on what I contribute or how I respond. So that whole mindset, as you say, you see it on TV, And you see it in our political world where,
They can't even get that far.
yeah, it compromise is the highest order you can get to, but it's in many cases seen as a bad word now. So how do you transcend compromise to what really is called collaboration?
Okay, and collaboration is really working together effectively to make a decision or resolve a conflict.
Mhm.
And I think really it requires both some skill and some goodwill, both of those kinds of things.
Yeah, when that's not there as an underlying that I care about you and I care about me, then all the kind of spiteful kind of communication, the argument, the fight, as opposed to focused. By the way, we've developed kind of, I don't know, we've developed it, but we're using a new word that my colleague and I have just written a book, 2 workbooks just on the awareness wheel. And we call what we talk about as inner action, INNERACTION. So using the wheel is interaction. The skills are really interaction skills, many of them as well. So anyway, based on collaboration is based on your wheel and my wheel that we can both disclose.
We draw on my experience and your experience, and that means that each person has to put it out there, my experience, in a respectful kind of way. And it's based on wants for my partner, myself, and us as a relationship. So the skill part would come into using the talking skills that are taught in the couple communication program, and the listening skills to bring that together to work out a decision.
And the mats, as you said, help structure that and prompt it, become kind of a platform for that. But the issue you mentioned about schooling with your kids, once you had really discovered your interests at a deeper level and fuller level, really broader level, what's really important, then it takes you very naturally to, okay, now how do we implement this?
What are
Because
some options?
and with that, the spirit behind it is very different. It isn't, I'll do this if you do that. It's, okay, we've built an agreement here. What are we going to do? And the next step is how do we create
We're in
it?
it together. Yeah, we're
Yes,
in it
and
together.
so we
Yeah.
find a solution that we call a best fit solution that takes into account one another's wants
Both of us and
and
our
the wants for the relationship. And in your case, the us can extend maybe beyond the partner
your
to
family.
the us of
Mhm.
our family.
Right. That's really good.
So one other common word that we hear often in society is marriage is all about sacrifice.
Well, the jokes when you get married about putting your feet in the cement,
Oh, I didn't know that
oh,
one.
I've heard a bunch of them over the years, and you give up your life and all that business. Anyway, sacrifice. One of the things research shows that among healthy couples, sacrifice occurs. It's an important thing, but sacrifice.
Would be a mutual kind of sacrifice.
That's right. Yeah. And in that, I think with it comes a longer term view. A lot of times, sacrifice is kind of what I do now, and I'm upset or unhappy about what I have to sacrifice now. That's where the us is. Thinking longer term, if there's an us in a relationship, I will sacrifice for it sometimes. So it's, as Phyllis said, mutual. The other piece is that what often can happen in sacrifice is one person does the sacrificing and the other person doesn't. And so you get a pattern that's not healthy. And remember, coming together, going apart, one leads, one follows, the other leads, one follows. But in sacrifice, one leads and the other one sacrificed to always follow, and it's never goes the other way. But I have to say, I think in our own relationship, I don't see much sacrifice. Occasionally we do, but I think we more figure things out based on Phyllis's interests, my interests, and then how can we make those both fit? And sacrifice kind of evaporates. But very often, say with healthcare or disability or other, change in jobs or commuting, or, there are a lot of external impacts that hit us, that we look at sacrifice as how can I transcend just my interests at this moment or longer term for the good of sometimes for spiritual good, for relational health as
And
well.
and I think there's a question of long term, what is better for the relationship long term? What is better for our family long term? And thinking of more than just the now, because I think we live in a world of immediacy. What do I want now? What I don't want to give up something, I want it now. And sometimes it takes a longer term view. And perhaps we can see that having a longer term relationship more. That
Speaking
there
of
are,
that, how long have you been married?
oh my goodness, forever.
Over 60 years. We're
Yes.
pushing about 63.
No, 60, we're 61 and a half to be
Oh,
exact.
okay.
So
Wow.
that's a long time.
Congratulations.
But I
But
tell you, we started, and we're still working on trying to create a collaborative operating
yeah,
system.
this
This
is
stuff
this
is
is
a
a
lifetime journey,
I was
okay?
going to say a lifetime project, but we're working at it,
But when we signed on,
and he's learned really well.
when we signed on, rather than a collaborative operating system, see, I didn't see one growing up. I mean, I did and I didn't. My folks did a lot of good things together, but it wasn't always real collaborative. It was dad leads, mom follows kind of situation. So when we got married, we had a unilateral operating system, and Phyllis was a good follower for a while. And then things started
Well,
to
I
change.
can remember also thinking about money and how money decisions were made. Some way I was talking with my folks about it, and I was working, I think, teaching probably school early in our marriage together before I did work in corporations. But I said something to my parents about, well, while I make money, Sherrod makes the decisions on how the money is spent. And my dad said, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's right. Um,
So I had good backup.
but well,
That was her dad too, not
I
mine.
think it
The
was.
external validation.
I think, well, my parents, I would say, had a nice relationship, and I think Sherrod's parents did too.
By the way,
They-
he
they
thought I
were-
was, excuse me, but he thought I was Meathead and he was Archie.
Oh, well, you're
Keep going.
talking about
Keep going.
a TV show, All in the Family, and Archie was the father-in-law type of thing. Anyway, well, I forgot what I was going to say,
Oh,
except
I'm
over
sorry.
that. No, that's all right.
Money, the money,
What
the
it
money.
was is that
Yeah.
we learned as a couple, and we learned really from the couple communication program that he was developing about how to be more collaborative. And I think definitely we are more collaborative
Yeah.
now. And it's important in my view, it's important at every stage in a relationship, in a marriage, particularly
Oh,
because
in
it's-
dating.
well, whether, yeah, but in every stage of the relationship, well, we were maybe getting our schooling before we had children, and we certainly with children, it's very important. And then when they leave, how we live our lives together and just how we navigate some of the issues that we have at this point in our lives, whether it's with healthcare or things like that. So I think at every stage in a couple relationship, and it's important.
Absolutely.
But you asked about sacrifice, and you got more than that. But sacrifice, I think, as Sherrod says, to sum up, is more of a long-term look. But what
Yeah. Well, the
decision-
other thing I like about it is I'm hearing when you take that long-term view and you have healthy conversations around what it is your interests are, making sacrifices where at choice, and having conscious conversations and being able to willingly say, I am willing to lay this down for the good of our relationship. And I feel really good about that, as opposed to being coerced or manipulated into giving up something. I think there's a real difference between how one sacrifices that
Yes.
makes all the difference in the world. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I also think
Well,
that in today's
oh, go ahead. No,
okay,
go
I
ahead.
was going to say I also think that in today's society there's so many friction points, and
Mm,
there's so many things coming at us as maybe a young couple, maybe with younger children. There's so many elements that come into play to make the family move forward.
mm,
And so I think there's more opportunities for these friction points to come up where maybe there has to be a sacrifice. And I'm just wondering about that though. Like, yes, like if we're collaborating together and we're really looking at, I love what you said about the long term vision. And so if we're looking at a long term vision, and we had to move around a lot because of Thomas's job and other family reasons. And so, and part of that was a sacrifice. You know, I just got settled into a new state and I've been there maybe a year. I'm starting to meet friends, and all of a sudden, oh, we're up. We have to
mm.
move
You're
to
moving off. Yeah.
yeah. And so some of it was a sacrifice, but it was, like you said, it was okay. The long-term vision of where are we going? What are we doing? What are we gaining by sacrificing this? And so, but I would love for you to talk about just sacrifice in a marriage, and how can you do it in a healthy way where there's like healthy boundaries, and one person, like you said, isn't always where it seems like they're just sacrificing. They're the only ones doing the sacrificing.
Well, absolutely. I was going to say that looking at it from a longer term perspective, it really means that a person has to look, okay, if I do sacrificing now for the sake of our marriage and our relationship, is there going to be another time that perhaps the other person gives
Mhm.
up something he wants? And I know that we've done not a lot of moving, but for me, and you mentioned this, Trisha, you just start to get to know somebody, and then you're leaving that area where you get, say, a friendship group or some kind of
There's a
support group.
loss. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have moved a few times, and I think that there are times that I have had to give up my women friends because of some kind of move. Now, it's true, we still stay in touch with those that are still around, those kinds of things, but that's happened a couple of times. And we're in a situation now where we've talked about this, and we're in a church group that has been from more my interest, a small group. And we talked about this because Sherrod might not have wanted to be part of that particular group or something, but we talked about what that meant for me. Now, I don't know if that's a big sacrifice for him, but there are times
Mhm.
when we make things work that fits, the other person too. And for me, what's important is to talk about this. Okay, what does this mean now? And to do it in a respectful way, and for me to put out my wants for myself, and to try to incorporate wants for him as well, and all of that. But I think there
Well,
have been some sacrifice times for
no, there
us in
certainly have. And by the way, going back early in our marriage, Phyllis, I think, had a hard time, as many women did, and I think maybe still do, particularly, saying what they want. My mother's generation couldn't say what she wants. Some women were raised to sacrifice everything. And so I remember,
we learned our roles well,
yeah,
or some of us did.
yeah. And so to live more symmetrically. By the way, I want to pick up on something else you said, Tricia, earlier about all the points of potential friction and so forth. There is a huge force in our culture right now, fragmentation. You know, that all the media options, a certain amount of pressures to go this way or that way, and dealing with the forces of the economy at any point in time. But we're fragmenting and not bridging. And so really going back, I think the solution to sacrifice is to collaborate whenever possible. And that is, I think I said earlier, I think it's transformational. It builds your relationship and it helps bridge the hard times because you build trust that my partner's there. And as Phil said, there's time it'll come back, but I'm not keeping track of, okay, now it's my turn.
Yeah,
That's
right.
that's
Right.
No.
not the
You're not
spirit
keeping
of
score.
what
I
we're
I
talking
think
about.
that conversation about what I want now, what I want for you now, what I want for our relationship, and is really important so that it gets out. And I'm willing to do this so that how can we reach this kind of thing? Or
Well, by
I
the
just
way,
want
we've gone to owning one car, and
nice.
the
How's that working out, Sharon?
well, there were bumps along the way. There were bumps along the way, but we talked about it a lot. And
well, what it forces you to talk because and to look at your calendars and do some planning ahead. So that's the good side in it. It occasionally we've bumped up on some, conflict of schedule and so forth. But I think it'd be hard to do with kids or
oh,
we're in a retirement state, semi anyway.
yes. So we've done some other things there. We have had a period of time when I think you needed to rent a car for a week or so because we had so many conflicts. But anyway,
Cheaper than owning a second car, by
but,
the way.
well, yes, but that was just one example of how looking at what fits for both of us and what fits for the relationship as well as each person individually.
And what fits for the planet, why
Well, anyway,
I mean,
yes.
that was part of my decision.
But I'm talking bigger than that one.
Yeah, that why
Yes.
I,
when we cut back.
Sharon, I just want to connect one thing and then ask a question. Whenever we talk about the wants, the reason why you talked about all five parts of the wheel being really important, because the wants get connected to the emotions, right? What will having
It's
that
all
thing, that
interconnected.
interest do for you? What is it doing for you? What are you thinking? And then what are you experiencing? So it's all an interconnected framework, and all of that's going on inside of us. And what we've found to be so valuable is it allows us to unpack that in a
Mm,
way that we can then
mm,
communicate it to one another without, so it can be heard, right? Because you're coming from a place of I as opposed to you, right?
mhm.
And I think that that's just really key. And one of the things that first of all, we believe this should be a mandatory program that everyone needs to take. Maybe we should start at kindergarten to teach
Yes.
people how to
Yeah.
communicate effectively. But that's not where we often are. We're often with people that are in marriages. And what we find is there's maybe more, but two, where you're either in pursuit and you're just like, hey, how can we keep building skills so that we can make this the best marriage possible? Or another state, which is, you know what, things aren't working out so good, and we need something that's going to help us move into a different direction because the current course isn't working. And my question is really, we find like how to get the investment that people take or willing to make into this type of program. What would you say, or what questions would you ask people to ask themselves to say, is this a good investment to invest in collaborative marriage skills to improve my communication, our communication? We find that it's not like people are knocking down the doors to get in, right?
No.
But everyone could benefit from this, I truly believe.
Well, you can think of it in terms, I think it can help you at work, just the skills at work. Okay. What's that worth? What's our relationship? The investment that we put into our relationship, I'm talking dollars now. The research shows that marriages do better. And when people do well together, they do better financially, they're healthier, they live longer. These are all forces at work because we care about each other, we support each other rather than fragment. I was giving a keynote address once and ahead of time we're off the side with some hors d'oeuvres kind of before the talk and so forth. And there was an attorney there, and I said to the attorney, "What does divorce cost?" And, I mean, he didn't hesitate. He said 30%. And I said, "Well, 30%, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you either have to make 30% more money to maintain your lifestyle, or you give up 30%." I mean, I'm giving you a dollar kind of answer. Besides your health, your happiness, all the things that we work hard for. So giving some time and some effort to a well-researched program that can help you. There are other programs out there that are very helpful as well, but it's investing in us. And most of us don't grow up thinking about investing in us.
I think in our current life, and maybe from a different perspective, people have always had busy lives. But right now, both partners working or one partner raising the children more than the other partner because the other partner is working. There are different pulls on us. And I think it seems like it's busier and busier lives, and our children's lives are more busy than ever before. And so I see this with our son and daughter-in-law and our daughter and son-in-law and their families. It's just that there's lots and lots going on for people at all ages, whether it's the children and they're in sports or various kinds of things like that. So I think we live such busy lives that we don't stop and think what would help us do better and be more contented. And I think that's important and peaceful in our life. Can we invest in something that would give us more peace? Because there's a lot of noise out there.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
People will spend thousands of dollars seeing a therapist as opposed to some dollars learning how to equip the relationship better. Prevention is harder to sell than pain, relief from pain.
Yeah.
When people are in a reactive mode. By the way, Thomas, I wanted to pick up. I'm going to borrow from you. I love your phrase, speaking of the awareness wheel as a tool to unpack a situation. I've never thought of it in that terms, but that's exactly what that tool is for. Unpacking what's going on inside of me, stopping to reflect, and then trying to put the parts together congruently so that I live congruently. I think over the years, Phyllis, in our own relationship, we've had all the challenges that everybody else has had. And the part of it is
maybe not all of them.
Not all of them?
We've had a lot.
We
of
missed
them.
one.
Well, we haven't had all of them.
Anyway,
No, I know that.
Oh, there are more to come. Anyway, now I'm nervous. Anyway, I forget what I was going to say.
Well,
Anyway.
it's over our lives.
Over our lives. Oh, yeah. Trying to live congruently with our faith, with what we teach, with the skills. That's partly
with our relationships.
Trying to live congruently in the community and with our people that's a high value, I guess I'd say. Now that's all we know. Unless you have more,
That's really good. Well, it just makes me think about just couples so there's a few couples that we've worked with where we've taken them through the program, but one person it would seem like one person is the one that's doing all the pulling. They're
most of it.
Yeah, or most of the pulling. And the other person is just like, oh, there's not an issue. We're fine. But they have no interest in interacting with the world or their partner or growing or anything. And so, but this learning this process and these skills and this self-awareness still has helped her, because regardless if he's turned towards her and has agreed to make the effort himself, she is still learning to become more self-aware herself, how to respond differently.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
in that process, and you talk about faith, and in that process, building her faith with God and learning how to still love her husband well through this situation,
Huge
through this life,
challenges. Yeah.
through the disappointments. And just recently I heard from her that he's actually now he's making an effort, and they're going to church together, and some of the things that she was actually been asking for, he's now responding and is now moving towards her in that. And so I just love that, that this program can be not just for couples who want to do it together, but also for individuals just learning how to
Be better communicators.
be better
Yeah.
communicators and how to do relationships with people in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes one person to change. That's
It
me.
just takes one to go first. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I really think so. And without the agenda too, right? Because they're
Yeah.
invested in becoming a better version of themselves, and
Yes. Yeah.
independent of what the other person does. And that we find that does bring, usually with faith and prayer, it brings the other person along over time. We're about to land the plane. We went up to 36,000 feet, and now we're on the way down. So we have just a couple of last questions for you both. And that's, if someone's interested in your work and the programs that you offer, how would you suggest they get in touch, or where do they go for more information?
Well, couplecommunication.com, and that's really the place to go for material and any training, instructor training. And then there's also a program, Couple Communication, available online, that virtual, I guess you would say. And I think they have some list of instructors around the country for in-person training. Yeah. And after July, I think there'll be the website awarenesswheel.com, which either Couple Communication or awarenesswheel.com, I think they will be interlinked as well. And these two new workbooks on the awareness wheel focus more on individual rather than relationship. And for some people, that might be of more interest, although the thrust has been couple here.
Excellent. And 61 and a half years of doing life together.
I
That's
was a child bride.
Yeah, she was 13.
Oh,
so you went to South Dakota, is that right?
no, we didn't.
um
By the way,
Wrap it all up for us.
that Phyllis and I this is not true, but I'll say it anyway.
We had two children, and we realized it took both of us in our situation.
Yeah.
It took both of us to be parents to them, not, and so that's what he said.
And it
Is
took
that
the threat of having to do it alone that kept you together.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, one more. Our son did well in high school, and he went up to the University of Colorado after graduation. And at Thanksgiving, he called us and said he was going to finish the term, but leave and go with his junior high band and be a rock star. And that was, he was smart to do this over the phone, but Phyllis was on one, when he called on one phone, I was on another extension. And anyway, he told it, and I listened to him. And after he talked a while, I said to him, "Your heart isn't in school right now." And which is what we would try and teach as an acknowledgement. "No, it really isn't, Dad." And anyway, we talked, and anyway, he ended up leaving school, going on with his junior high band. Anyway, when we hung up, Phyllis walked in and said, "That was amazing." And I said, "What was amazing?" And she said, "Well, the way you acknowledged him." She had heard me on other occasions when I was not as skilled with this young man. And what I want to say here is these skills help you in your parenting. Levi went on for 5 years, bounced around the country, played music with his friends, one day called and said he wanted to go back to school. During that time, Phyllis and I, either one of us at night, if in the night sometimes I would think of Levi and I would pray for him. Phyllis would do the same. The other thing we determined,
Okay, let me
Getting
say it. So we determined that we would stay connected. We wouldn't cut him off,
which is one option.
you know, which some people do, or things like that. We determined to continue a relationship. So sometimes he'd call up and one of us or both of us would take him out to lunch.
Yeah.
He was always ready to eat.
He was good for a burrito.
Yeah, always. And then we'd talk to him and so on. But then he determined one day, like Sherrod said, he called up, said he wasn't using his head. He wanted to go back to school, and he did. And he was ready to then, and he went back with the passion. And now he's a physician and has 2 teenage boys himself. So,
Wow. What a testament. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing that. That's wonderful.
Well,
that's really good. All right.
I-
Well, any last words? Sherrod, any last wisdom, any advice
Well,
or practical?
thank you for this time. I appreciate the work you're doing and the
thank
opportunity
you so
to
much.
kind
Yes.
of reflect on this.
Right.
Hey, stay well.
Thank you for listening to Seeds for Your Marriage with hosts Trisha and Thomas Walker. We pray this episode has given you tips and tools on how to thrive in your marriage. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Trisha and Thomas.
We want to hear from you. Be sure to leave a review and let us know how we're doing. It's our desire that this podcast completely benefits you. So also let us know future marriage topics that you would like to hear about.